There's not much to talk about here, but everyone kept asking me about, like, what about the next Mortal Kombat game? What is Evo going to be when they show the next NRS game? What the heck's going to happen? Yada, yada, yada. Ed literally came out and said something. Ed actually came out and said words about this. Ignore the Elden Ring. At the end of or in relation to his Big Dice Award, and congratulations again, Ed, for pioneering one of the biggest fighting game franchises in the world. He had something to say about it in their next game. He actually said something, but he would get in trouble if he said anything more. So let's read what he had to say at the end of the interview. Hold on a sec. Where is it? Let's read this one first. When you're in the middle of it, it can be stressful and taxing, but when you are done and the product is received well, you tend to forget those days, the hard stuff. He goes on to say that the feeling of accomplishment is what energizes him to move on to the next title, and the new Hall of Fame accolade helps him in the struggle's worth it. And talking about their release schedule from like MK9 up until Injustice, MKX, Injustice 2, and then MK11 make up a launch timeline for their fighting games. And according to Boone, that pattern has been officially broken. Officially. Yes, we know it has been the longest period of time that a NRS game in the past decade, in the past 10 years, the longest period of time that NRS has spent making a fighting game. So he said, when we broke that pattern, there was a lot of speculation of what we would be doing next. I can tell you there was a reason for all of it, and when we announce our next game, it'll make a lot of sense. And I think he even says something along the lines of, I can't say anything else, I will get in trouble. Here's what we can boil down from this. Number one, it's not Injustice 3. It's not Injustice 3. It seems like they are not going to be doing the same cycle that they've had for a long time. That's actually a lot of information if you really think about it. If you actually like process what's happened in the past and think about just him saying that, that's a lot that you can sort of pull from. They're breaking the cycle of their usual releases. To me, it either means one thing. It means that they are not making Injustice and they are making something completely different, right? Like a single player game. But I don't think that's the case. Yes, it is Mortal Kombat's 30th anniversary. And yes, several sources, and there has been an absolute quantifiable amount of leaks that have technically existed over the past 6 to 7 months that have led us directly in a direction of it being a new Mortal Kombat. Several, like a multitude of things that have pointed in the direction of the next game being Mortal Kombat and nothing else. Not Injustice, regardless of some NVIDIA links, not a crazy other game like with DC. No, it is Mortal Kombat. And even people that have been industry professionals have come out and said, yo, yeah, they're working on MK12. That's the game it's going to be. But I'll say I'm sticking to my initial prediction. I have some initial predictions of where NRS is going from this point forward, and it's based on some information that popped over like a while ago. This was a long time ago and sort of got swept under the rug. So I don't think they're making a single player game. I don't think that they are making Injustice, and this almost confirms the fact that it's not Injustice. I'm still behind the fact that they are doing a brand new fighting game franchise, something that they have never actually done before. And we talked about this a bit earlier this week, why I think it's that. This game is taking a lot longer to make. Granted, COVID is definitely a perpetrator when it comes to the reason why this game might be taking a long time, 100%. But it's taking even longer than it seems like we'd be anticipating. Why would the game need longer to take, right? Why would a game need longer to develop? Well, simply put, there might be more original content in it. Mortal Kombat and Injustice have had a pretty huge plethora of play styles and concepts that essentially pull from each other. You're able to like make new characters in a new Mortal Kombat because the previous characters have something to sort of work from and mechanics and stuff like that, you know? You can sort of like pull from something. The same thing with Injustice and Injustice 2. Like at least with Injustice 2, you can definitely, they pulled a lot from Injustice 1, which absolutely cut down on some of the development time it took to put that game out, which is why it came out and looked as good as it did within the speed, the time frame, that they were able to put it out. But if you're coming up with a completely like different franchise, brand new characters that don't pull from Mortal Kombat, that don't pull from DC, that might be having a roster of characters that is not technically based on like legacy games in any way, that's going to take more time. All these brand new, technically like brand new assets potentially would boil down to a substantially longer development time. And especially the fact that he said he's going to be in a lot of trouble, right? I'm going to be in a lot of trouble if I say anything more, and Ed loves to leave hints. Everyone thinks that Ed's the most trolly person in the world on Twitter. People are looking way too deep into the casual stuff that Ed says, and they don't realize when he's hinting. However, Ed has a pretty hilarious history, because people's memories only go back like a year or two. He's got a pretty insane history of you go back a few years, maybe even 4 or 5 years, and he's calling things that are going to show up 4 years later. This is how long games actually take to make, chat. Like, people don't realize that he's not hinting at something that's going to be here in this game. He's hinting at something that's going to be here potentially in a year for the next game that gets announced, and that game doesn't come out for another year. There has already been several things in some fashion on his Twitter, much less in between a bunch of other things that came out a long time ago that lead me to believe that it's still potentially a Marvel game. Or specifically, I think it could be Marvel versus DC. I wouldn't be surprised. But the more I thought about it, right, the more my brain started calculating the situation, I was like, I don't know if it could be that, because Marvel versus DC feels like an endgame, you know? That feels like an endgame situation. So to me, maybe it's not that. Like, maybe it's something else. Like, maybe it's something even bigger. Like, maybe this multiverses thing is kind of like a hint at potentially how big they might be going with these franchises and stuff, because we've already seen how big they're willing to go with guest characters from MKX and beyond, even MK9, you know? Like, their guest character stuff really is like reaching into some Fortnite levels of just like, who's in this game now? What the hell? Like, and you have to think like those are the things that pull in the biggest audience. And to me, I would not be surprised if they're trying to like reach even deeper, if they're trying to go for something like huge, like mega crossover. But who knows? You know, that could be where the Marvel rumor came from. Long story short, all I'm going to say based on this and based on what has said in the future, that they could be going in a direction that's not Mortal Kombat and not Injustice. That makes the most sense to me. I wouldn't be surprised if they're trying to keep this stuff secret as possible, because we still don't know if this is going to be a thing. We don't know. This could be a literal misdirect, right? This could absolutely be a misdirect that they expect like nobody to pay attention to, if not a few people. And you know what? That's a good call, because I am officially misdirected. This is absolutely leading me to think that it's not Mortal Kombat 12 and it is not Injustice. That's where my personal mindset goes. I have a pretty crazy history of feeling out like where these devs want to go with certain franchises and titles in the future, and hoping that that's the case. And it literally turns out to be the case like several years in now, which is kind of nice, right? That is sort of cool. Unfortunately, being a prophet doesn't get you anything, right? It's a nice little feeling when something eventually get announced. That's a nice little feeling, but it doesn't really get you anything. It's just, I think I would prefer NRS to do something different. I want them to flex some goddamn gameplay muscles, man. I really do. I want them to flex some shit beyond Injustice and Mortal Kombat. I want them to reach 6 feet up their ass and pull something crazy gameplay wise out of something that is dramatically different than what they've been sort of like stuck into from the Mortal Kombat series as well as Injustice over the past 10 years. I'd love that. I'd love them to really give us something crazy, man. Go nuts with this, because we already know it's whatever it is. If it's a Marvel game, if it's a new IP, if it's a Kardashian fighting game, we don't know. But I guarantee you it's going to look good. It's going to have insane production value. It's going to be insanely marketed from WB in a variety of ways. And it's going to be huge, right? It's going to be a big fucking deal. I'm in the next game. Yes, I wish.